Even though he just made a deal of epic proportions, Joe Rogan might have accidentally just compromised his independent voice forever. Now, recently, podcasting superstar Joe Rogan inked an impressive deal with Spotify, an exclusivity deal for in excess of $100 million. Now, of course, this is great news for Joe Rogan and all the hard work he's put in through the years. It's also one of those kind of we made it to the big leagues type of things for podcasting in general. Before, you needed a large radio network behind you. You needed some kind of a broadcasting deal. You needed all kinds of stuff. And now, I don't think Joe Rogan was the first podcaster, but one of the first great ones. Now, all of a sudden, in your basement, you can just set up a couple microphones, a soundboard, just kind of start talking and just talk about whatever. And no one can tell you what to do. No one can demonetize you. No one can censor your voice in any way. This was a great, unprecedented sort of way to let anyone basically have a voice and be the media, whether or not they have any kind of formal training, whether they have any kind of backing, anything like that. And so to see someone like that come so far to a $100 million plus deal, that's pretty insane. And that's obviously great news on that end. Now, what could have possibly caused this? Of course, it could have been there's a lot of speculation, and only Joe and his team actually know. And of course, it could just be about the money. That's all of a sudden this offer that wasn't really on the table before now just landed in his lap. And how could you say no to that? How could you say no to basically taking care of your kids and your grandkids and their kids just with one deal? But there's also some speculation that this could have been, for example, this could have stemmed out of censorship. Especially in recent years, YouTube has been known to do all kinds of shady things with censorship. And in particular, right now there's a few things that get completely removed instantly without any kind of fair trial, so to speak. Notably, anyone who questions the official World Health Organization narrative or provides an alternative perspective in any way on the whole coronavirus pandemic. Of course, Joe Rogan has spoken very freely about this. He's had all kinds of guests on with varying degrees of opinions, and there has been rumor of YouTube throttling people's view counts down, their monetization down, all kinds of things like that. As one of the larger platforms he's been on, I can easily see why he'd want to move away from that. And especially, it's been hard to work with large corporations like that as someone who is just so independent, as someone who just kind of speaks his mind about anything and has no restrictions, which is the entire value proposition behind this show to begin with. Now, unfortunately, it seems like the Spotify deal may end up representing a single point of failure rather than multiple. Now, previously, the Joe Rogan Experience was on all kinds of different platforms, all kinds of different audio-only podcast avenues, on YouTube, of course, and getting grief from one of these or even a couple of these providers, while detrimental, doesn't really just shut him down entirely. Now he's going to become exclusively reliant on Spotify. And one thing we noticed that in his actual announcement video, he mentioned that, hey, I'm not going to be an employee of Spotify, which is kind of an odd thing to kind of say, but basically it's very clear that Spotify has a very strong hold over basically his financial future now. And even though he's not an employee, he's just an independent contractor. He just produces his show. All of it's just going over there. Practically speaking, this is a huge amount of control. Unfortunately, I think that one of the results of this is we might see Joe Rogan's independent voice become a little bit squashed over the years. Now, of course, this isn't saying anything about Spotify, what the company is about, what kinds of things they might allow or disallow, anything like that. But as soon as you have everything under one provider, then they hold everything. They hold the control of the content, the entire distribution platforms, all the follower bases you worked decades on building, and of course the money. It's always about the money. At some point, Joe Rogan could do something that will run afoul of Spotify, and they can tell him, yeah, you can't do this, or don't say it like this, or whatever else. And knowing the kind of person he is, I don't think he's the kind of person to bow to pressure such as that, at least not instantly, at least not, when the rubber hits the road. But if you have something like that with, say, a YouTube, but you're on all these other platforms, you can kind of push the envelope a little and lose out on one, and then you can always move over to others. If you're just if all your audience and all your money is all tied to a single platform, they can basically tell you to do whatever you want. They can tell you to jump and you have to say how high. If not, you just lose out on everything. Now, of course, someone with Joe Rogan has multiple jobs. His podcast is super famous. It is conceivable that if something like this happened, he would obviously move on and not just stay doing what he doesn't want to do for a platform that doesn't want him to have his unique voice. But of course, it would take a little while to get to that point. I don't think we'd have, for example, Alex Jones on saying all the kinds of crazy stuff that we all know and love him for. I don't know if they would tolerate that out the gate. And of course, it would be like, well, that's a small concession. Maybe I just don't have him on, but I can still say whatever I want about anything else. Bit by bit, it starts chipping away at one of those valuable independent voices until at some point you just hit with this shell of a show that doesn't really have that bite that it used to. It doesn't have that authenticity. And in order to move over, now if you decide you want to go independent again and just say, screw the Spotify network, I'm going to do my own thing, I'm going to get back on these other platforms, you have to start from zero. You have to have all your back catalog that's not available. You have to go out on social media and just say, hey guys, can you please subscribe to me back on these platforms because this Spotify thing, this exclusivity thing didn't work out. And then you lose a lot of, obviously revenue, but also a lot of your audience just kind of gets lost along the way. And people who are on Spotify are like, hey, how come there's no more Joe Rogan podcasts? Eventually it dries up. It's a really bad situation. And of course, I'm not predicting this thing will necessarily happen, but I do definitely predict that Joe Rogan's independent voice will become watered down or a little bit more mainstream. And that's kind of a sad thing, unfortunately. Now, crypto people know all about the dangers of this sort of thing. The entire reason all of us, for the most part, first took an interest in decentralized technology is that it's decentralized. No one party can go shut it down. Even among decentralized platforms and systems, you have a large selection of which one to use. For example, I used to live entirely off of Bitcoin. And at some point, that became difficult because of transaction fees and other issues like that. And even though it's a decentralized network, something still happened to compromise it for my purposes. But thankfully, anyone can copy and paste the Bitcoin code base and just create something completely the same, or someone can create something completely new, or someone can do some kind of a hybrid and create something new that's based on that but still different. And you can there's so many different things to choose from. It's a true free market of money and technology. The same goes for platforms. Now, I'm uploading this one exclusively to LBRY because I believe LBRY is the best, and also because I want to take part in this pilot monetization thing here. Now, using a platform like LBRY, there's just no way you can actively censor to that degree. And even if for some reason the LBRY company starts doing some shady things and the client that's shipped to everyone, some stuff starts being snuck into the code that starts censoring different things or changing up the algorithms or whatever, first off, everyone's going to catch it because it's all open. And it's just so easy to just essentially do what Hive did when Steam became taken over by Tron, is just move over and just move the exact same people, the exact same audience to just a fork of the code. It's just so easy to do this. Now, if Joe Rogan had decided to move to LBRY instead of Spotify, I would have felt much better about that, because at that point, the chances of censorship would be almost zero. There'd be almost no way to filter through his opinions and get rid of demonetize his content or anything like that. And even so, he could keep all the same subscribers, etc., even if something happened to the main LBRY client. We just fork it, and then there's another one. And of course, who wouldn't follow Joe Rogan over to a uncensored or less censored or more free version kind of thing? And then all the followers and everything just copies over. It's just the same. Congratulations to Joe Rogan for landing probably the biggest deal of his lifetime. I'm just worried that it's going to compromise your voice, and just always keep a watch out for people trying to restrict your speech. And just remember, LBRY is always there for you if you need a little backup.